So hi everyone, now that the recording has started, we're just waiting on a quorum to begin. We're at 5 out of 9. I received note from Elton and Fran that they won't be here, but I think everyone else replied that they would, so we should have a pretty full house.
Alex, since we have a minute, I'm just going to step out and grab some water. I will be right back.
Great. So that's all the promotions that should happen for now, unless someone specifically has something they want to share, Eleanor.
Okay, sounds good.
We're at will be 10 people I'm admitting right now. So if the chair wants to kick us off to keep us on calendar, we're ready to rock on our end.
Sure, yeah, let's get started. Sounds good. I wanted to apologize for everybody, just to let you know, as you probably noticed, I'm in an airport, so I'm probably going to try to stay a little bit quiet, but yeah, let's get going.
Perfect. So for the sake of this meeting, we sometimes kick this off with minutes. At the previous meeting of the committee, the committee voted to approve that the chair could approve of those minutes after the fact. So the chair approved both the previous minutes already, and would do something similar at the end of this meeting or over email. The agenda for tonight is pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to present some of the changes we've made since we last met. And then at the end of the meeting, we would have a vote for the committee to approve these changes. A lot of this is due to something I'll bring up sort of a little later in the meeting when I'll give you some context. But we felt, one, it was helpful to just give you an overview of these changes, and two, some of them really did necessitate a vote. So we wanted to make sure that we went through that whole process.
Alex, will you comment on the extension from 7 to 10 years and how that affects this committee?
Absolutely, yep. All right, let's share this guy. Everyone can see this lovely purple-backed presentation here. Fantastic. So I'll just jump right in. I wanted to give first everyone a heads up of where we're at in the approval. Since we sort of met in May, we have been shopping this around to lots of different boards and commissions and speaking with the state. We got approval from all you folks at the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, as well as enthusiastic approval from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and from the Conservation Commission. A few the commissions and boards, notably the Park and Rec Commission and the Brookline Planning Board, voted for approval with conditions. I'll speak to those conditions tonight and how we incorporated those into this draft of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. The Division of Conservation Services, this is the state level approval. They had a few changes they required as part of their conditional approval. Again, we got conditional approval, which is great, which means essentially we are kind of pre-approved for this plan through 2035, which is really, really good. We just have to make a couple of these tweaks, and then once we get those tweaks into the mix, we'd be eligible for any grants or grant applications or the other benefits that come with open space plans down the line. So that's where we're at, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what these conditional approvals are and where we're at. This is a summary of all the changes we've made and that are incorporated in this current draft of the open space and recreation plan that you have access to. Um, One of the things that the feedback we got from the planning board was that they felt that, one of the things we discussed a lot in our open space and recreation plan committee, both at the meeting of the whole and in the subcommittee meetings, was that this open space and recreation plan was essentially an element of other strategic plans we have in town. Some communities and some towns and municipalities, sort of the open space and recreation plan represents everything related to open space and recreation. We're pretty lucky in Brookline in that we have not only this plan, but we also have an athletic feeds Nils assessment. We have a park and recreation strategic master plan. So really a lot of the purpose of our open space and recreation plan is to talk about the expansion, enhancement, and connectivity of these open spaces and really explore more opportunities for passive open space. When we described that in the planning board meeting, and they felt that that wasn't emphasized enough in the narrative sections of our plan and that could be made clearer. So one of the changes we did is we actually added another paragraph into the introduction there, sort of summarizing what I'm talking about here is that just because something isn't specifically in this plan doesn't mean the town is enthusiastic about it. But when we look at more specifics around things like athletic fields and play courts and an outdoor pool and things like that, that really that information is represented in other plans. And the focus of this plan is primarily on passive open space, greenways, connectivity, resource protection, and enhancement of open space. Some of the feedback we got from the state was that they wanted a more comprehensive description of our enhanced outreach to environmental justice communities. This is really just some admin change that Rebecca and I did. We reformatted some of these sections and further emphasized some actions that we took back in March, April, and May in terms of our kind of widespread communication and outreach related to the plan. For section 5, this is our big beefy inventory section. Some of the feedback we got from Park and Rec was a request that the Baldwin School Playground be recategorized away from a school playground, which it really isn't anymore, into a neighborhood park, which we were happy to accommodate. This involved, unfortunately, when you choose one thing, it actually moves a lot of stuff around. We had to update the open space map, we had to update the school map, we had to update the neighborhood map. But now those sort of reflect really where a Baldwin School Playground sits. We beefed up the description of the municipal golf course, as well as including a more comprehensive description of Putterham Woods and the resources that are available there. And one of the things that we have asked for from the state is in terms of recreational opportunities and potential for different categories. We had previously sort of rated this as it has high passive potential, it has high active recreation potential, or low or not applicable. And the state said, no, give us some more specifics. So what we did is we went through all of those dozens and dozens of locations, Rebecca and I, and we asked for input from the directors of sustainability and from parks and from recreation. We took information from the existing CIP through the capital improvement plan through 2031, as well as information that came up during the public discussions of the open space planning and added those specific potential amenities and resources into each of those properties. This usually took the form of, is there potential for a greenway connection? Is there potential for, when we look at Cypress Street Playground or Baker School, is there an opportunity for a bicycle connection as identified in conversations and in our own action plan? Is there an opportunity for a community garden? Is there an opportunity for, in the case of the CIP, actually looking at the different resources that are planned for this, whether it's a basketball court replacement or whether it's a potential garden or whether it's potential open space improvements. So really, it wasn't introducing any new information. It was just summarizing specifics that hadn't been in there before. For section 7, the analysis of needs, this was a section that we pretty much rewrote from the ground up. Some of the feedback that the state gave is they wanted some more specifics in this. We had taken a more narrative approach to us, which I think yielded a pretty great product. But Rebecca really worked on this to make sure we were taking our survey statistics from the community survey and intersecting them throughout the needs analysis to provide data for all the points we were making. We also provided a little more information recognizing those community needs, such as the outdoor pool and the gardens. This was from some feedback from the planning board. So we beefed that analysis of needs section up a little bit. I think it added about half a page. In terms of the action plan, so this is the big dog in the conversation tonight. So the feedback we got from the state was that essentially during this process in March or April of this year, a few months ago, they updated all the guidelines for open space and recreation plans. Having not updated them in about 20 or so years, the update happened while we were doing this process. So I reached out to the state when this happened and said, hey, we've been working off this other workbook. Do we have to change the way we've been doing everything? They said, no, stick with the way we've been doing it. It will be approved like this. And I said, great, because we've had 25 meetings under a certain framework and we wouldn't want to shift everything now. So when we submitted this to the state, one of the points they came back with is, so one of the advantages to using this new workbook is that plans are now good for 10 years instead of 7 years. As I mentioned in my email about this meeting, this is good for a lot of reasons. One is we have to do this process every 10 years instead of every 7 years, and just the nuts and bolts that go into the public process. Two is that it gives us breathing room and time to make sure that we're really putting all our energy into these goals. It gives us a little more stretch when we're looking toward achieving some pretty lofty objectives, goals, and actions over the next decade or so. And the third bit that's really kind of unique to Brookline is that this will allow our plan to sync up pretty closely with the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, which is the other big kind of hallmark roadmap plan for our division of sustainability and natural resources, which is great because we can kind of sync our planning efforts that much closer and really kind of keep everything in rhythm there rather than have one thing on a 10-year plan and one thing on a 7-year cycle that only every 3 cycles kind of line up again. So we're really excited about that potential. The drawback to that, or maybe not drawback, is that it did require us to look at the action plan and make sure that action plan is really 10 years and not 7 years. So what we did at a staff level is we went through the action plan and just adjusted some of the timeline. So in this version of the report, you'll see some actions that previously had a proposed completion date of 2031 have been bumped out to 2033. Some things that had a proposed completion date of 2028 have been bumped up to 2029. We looked through every action item. A lot of them, probably about half of them, are essentially ongoing efforts that are going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years regardless. But for ones that had a specific listed date of between 2026 and 2031, we kind of adjusted those appropriately to get us through a decade rather than a 7-year period. So that because we specifically had a vote as an open space plan committee on the action plan itself, that's one of the big reasons I wanted to make sure we all came together today to have a vote to make sure that by changing the action plan, we wanted to have a vote of approval from the open space plan committee, an opportunity to look at that if you folks had questions, and then to move forward with approval of the plan as a whole. In terms of maps, one of the things we did miss was a zoning map. This was this was fault of mine. It was something we overlooked. We've had it in previous plans and we just didn't include it this time around. It was an easy enough fix from Rebecca and I working with our GIS guy to put that together. The other map, which was a little more unusual, was the unique features map. This is a map that we have never had in an open space plan before, but it is part of their required package. And we had a few conversations about the state about what this unique features map looks like. It's essentially a blend of some of the sort of characteristics and spaces that make Brookline a unique place. So this map contains geologic features and historical parks and historic districts, and it's sort of a potpourri of different elements that aren't necessarily geographic and aren't necessarily environmental, but sort of represent some of the things that make Brookline a special place. It is subjective, and I sort of used our National Historic Landmark map as well as the narrative about these sections in the community setting to build this. But I do think it hits the mark that the state's looking for, and sort of adds another map to our package there. In terms of the bibliography, this was another suggestion by the planning board, is that, you know, in an effort to make sure that we really put the planning documents that we reference and that work in concert with our open space and recreation plan, that these were a lot of the primary sources that we used for construction of this. So we did a sort of a call out section at the beginning of the bibliography specific for town planning documents. So that's a really kind of quick summary of the changes we incorporated into this. I wanted to see if folks had any questions, and then based on the questions and discussion, you know, there would potentially be a vote of approval of this draft to move forward.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
or a suggestion. Maybe, I don't know if it's possible, but to indicate, you know, the Muddy River as part of the unique features, since it's, I don't know, it continues beyond just Brookline,
Sure.
part of, you know, the Charles River watershed and that whole,
Yeah, I'm happy to incorporate that.
I don't know if there are any other unique features.
Sure. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Yeah, Randolph.
Just again, another question about the unique features map. Alex, was that something that was in the previous model from the state, or was that introduced with this, you know, new framework?
No, it is not. It was in the previous requirements, and
Oh, was it in our previous plan? I don't
It was
remember
not.
in 2018.
It was not. So I don't know if it just snuck through the cracks or it was a different reviewer or something along those lines. We actually asked about that, Randolph. We said, hey, there was a National Historic map in the past. Is that what you're looking for? And it was,
Yeah.
no, we are looking for a unique features map. So
Okay.
we put one together.
Okay.
Michael.
Yes, thank you. I just want to be clear. What
You
really
froze up a
looked
little
at all
bit.
the changes that have been made? I haven't had a chance to look at all the changes that you've outlined. So
Sure.
what are we being asked to vote on today?
You would be asked to vote on this draft of the open space plan that incorporates the changes that we're talking about here. So essentially the narrative changes to section 2, the addition of the recreational opportunities into section 5, some additional sort of summarized info in the analysis of needs. The big dog again in that conversation is the action plan, which essentially just had its dates of execution pushed out a little bit to incorporate a 10-year plan. And then the inclusion of the zoning map and, again, a potentially slightly modified unique features map.
I mean, I'd be certainly happy to kind of vote on the outline, but I'd be reluctant to vote on something that I haven't read. Maybe that's my own shortcoming on this, but I'd like to get a better idea of what.
Would it help to, I'm happy to share some examples of what I'm talking about in the action plan in this meeting, Michael, if that would help.
I mean, is there a timeline for approval? What is the kind of the gating? What is the tempo here?
Sure.
What are you
So
looking for? Why do we have
Yeah.
to do this tonight? Yeah.
Ideally, if we approve this tonight, then this meeting, it gates us from being able to present to the select board. So unless we have approval by the committee, we can't really move it forward to the select board, which would be the final gate of approval there. So what we want is a full vote of support on this draft before moving forward there. In terms of support for the plan, we have conditional approval by the state. So once we make the changes that they're looking for and it meets the metrics they're looking for, you know, we'll be good to move forward. But that involves, again, having not only having support of our committee, but also a letter of support from the select board as well.
I'll just add, Michael, that the timeline is that we are looking to get the plan finalized and approved and submitted up to the state in its final form this late summer, early fall, so ideally September. And the reason this came back to the Open Space Plan Committee was the extension from a 7-year to a 10-year action plan. So that's that is really the substantive information that we're looking for this committee to vote on. We certainly would have shared, obviously, any of the other changes with you all, but we wouldn't have needed to come back for a vote. It's just the action plan that's driving the vote.
Well, in that case, I would really urge that any additions or changes just be highlighted and submitted so we could look at them. And I don't think that can, I mean, we're in the beginning of August. I think it would just be fair to have a chance to look at those.
Hey, Alex and Alexandra, a question.
Yeah.
Staff is still, even if we approve this, staff is still able to make some minor modifications following this vote, I'm assuming. I mean, you
Yes.
said we're voting on this draft. Is that the case?
Yeah, so essentially the vote tonight, we phrased it as a vote on the approval of this draft of the plan. Really that's based around the action plan. So if the group votes on the approved action plan, the kind of minor tweaks we're talking about are things that we could tweak at a staff level without needing I believe, unless I'm wrong, Alexandra, that we could make those slight tweaks without a meeting again as a committee.
That's correct. Yep. Just like when you all voted last time on the plan back in May.
Alan?
John, sorry, Michael
Sorry.
would, I'm just saying that because there was this question about process that Michael brought up. Michael, is that acceptable from your perspective, that if there were things that you were concerned about or minor changes, that they would be able to make them at a staff level? Is that all right with you, or?
If the action plan is the key, those are the key changes, I certainly would like to be able to look at them. Look, I'm representing the advisory committee. The advisory committee doesn't have kind of a say, go, no go, but I certainly feel it's my responsibility to have a look at something before I voted on it. And that's where I'm coming from, especially since some of the things we're talking about going out 10 years can cost a considerable amount of money. And that's essentially one of the focuses of the advisory committee. Can we afford what we're proposing? Can we, how do we get there? And so I feel a responsibility to have a look at something before I vote on it.
Alex, is it possible to actually just show us the changes? I mean, these are not wholesale changes, correct?
Sure.
I mean, I don't know how long that would take. How long would that take?
Well, I can give a sort of an overview version. Michael, I'm not sure how comprehensive you'd like to be here, but I can certainly highlight the things that we're talking about.
Alex, I would focus on the action plan. That's really the
Sure.
change here. So I think just pointing out there's been no text changes. It's the timeline. So we've gone from 7 years to 10. And so I think just pointing out where we'll see those shifts in
Sure.
the calendar would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and the first question, are there any new items or are these just changes in timeline?
Yeah, there's no new items to the action plan. There's no changes to any category on the action plan except for the proposed completion dates. These were sort of, we looked at them wholesale and kind of increased everything a little bit or proportionally to get us to a 10-year timeline. So again, if something were 2028, I generally boosted it to 2029. If something was 2031, I boosted it to 2033. So it generally added sort of a year or two, depending if you were earlier on in the completion or later on, with the ongoing ones, staying as unaffected. So you see like a 2033 finish here would have been 2031 in the previous draft. Things like 2030 and 2028 were previously 2029 and 2027. But nothing else.
Can you just, Alex, can you just like go through those?
Sure.
Like, I mean, I know that's going to take a couple of minutes, but that would be great.
Yeah. I'm seeing if I have a.
And wait, before you do that too, because I see a bunch of hands up and I kind of jumped in. I'd like to go to John Van Soyak.
Oh, thank you very much. I had a couple of questions, actually. I'll get to the one that was just prompted by something you said in the last minute or two. I mean, in what sense, I understand Michael's concern that we are committing ourselves to something that is going to stretch out over 10 years and could have, financial, fiscal implications. But in what sense, if any, are we committing in a way that is absolute? Or in what sense does the state have future ability to hold us to any of this?
Do you want me to take a pass at that, Alex?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so none. It's I guess
That's
the
what I was
shortest
assuming.
answer
That's
that
what
I
I was
can give
assuming.
you. So it's a requirement that we have the open space plan, and certainly that, you know, we demonstrate progress on it. But really the requirement is that we have it so that we're eligible for different grant funds moving forward. Obviously the last plan was, you know, a large part of that was engulfed during COVID. So I don't want to, you know, downplay the impact that that had on everything, all goals across municipal operations. But there was not a significant amount of progress on the action plan from that last open space plan. And that did not impact at all our ability to get the conditional approval that we've received from the state for this plan, and did not reduce our eligibility at all for any of the grants. So I think the commitment here is really that this represents the overarching goals of the community at large, and that these are things that Brookline will work to prioritize through a whole host of different operations and capital funding streams as available.
Can I ask a
Okay,
corollary, Alexandra, as well, which is if we chose to update the action plan, 10 years is a really long time. I like John's question. Are we able to update the list or the action items, and how would we go about doing that? I mean, 10 years seems, it's hard to plan that long.
So I can jump in if you'd like, Alexander.
Sure, yeah.
So I think that would take the format of, we have sort of semi-annual updates that we would do on this plan. So as part of not only the plan, but part of our internal operations is that this would be every 6 months, we're reporting to the Conservation Commission on the status of this. Some of this would develop organically, you know, to the state. Whether or not we complete a certain thing in 2029 or 2030 or 2031, I think is of less interest to them. But we can potentially, you know, internally tweak some of this stuff as we go. If it looks like we have the potential to push something, or it looks like we have some, you know, there's a barrier or something and we have to move it. So this action plan is going to be kind of a jumping off tool for us in terms of reporting, and will, you know, evolve organically over the next decade. This is our kind of roadmap, but obviously things will evolve and change as time goes on. And so that'll get tweaked and reported on in 6-month increments in that public meeting session.
John, do you still have your hand up?
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
great.
And if I may, you know, just bear with me for a minute while I describe sort of my understanding of what this is all about, in hopes that actually it will improve everybody's understanding of what this is about. And if I'm wrong, just say that my understanding is incorrect. Here's my understanding of this. In future years, there will be legislators who will have ideas for how the causes of open space and recreation can be advanced in municipalities all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That then gets translated into money in a state budget, you know, with the governor's approval for distribution, let's say by DCR. I'm assuming that's probably the right distribution source. And then DCR makes known that, you know, because of this money that's been appropriated for blah, 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 we want to get some, you know, interest shown by municipalities. Then they get a bunch of bids or applications from municipalities. And one of the first things they have to test is, you know, well, the town of Brookline says they'd like to have a piece of this, but did they even mention, you know, the purposes of this funding when they did their last long-range plan for recreation and open space? And so that's why this document becomes important, because at some point in the future, our applications for state grant money are going to be tested against whether we, in fact, are consistently stating what Brookline would like to have money for and needs to have money for. That's my understanding of this.
That's accurate, John. Yes. Yeah, we would be citing back to the open space plan for any of those grant applications, and that would be either are available or would become available through state funding sources. So
Yeah.
our goals and actions that you all have developed over the last couple of years are really the important piece
Yeah.
for us to be able to complete those funding applications.
Yeah, and I have one question and then I'm done. One more question. I thought I heard, Alex, I thought I heard you refer to in the plan, outdoor swimming pool is, expressed as a need. And I'm wondering if it is really expressed as a need or more of a, would like to have or, desire to have. Because I'm not sure we're at the point yet where it's clear that this is, a widely agreed upon need. There's going to be a lot of debate, when when the rubber meets the road over, where, how much money, how much do we really need it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So I'm trying to see my exact language here and incorporating it, but I think I said something along the lines of that, things along the line of the outdoor swimming pool and community gardens were sort of recognized as or were identified as needs in the survey process. But that while those, and that just that we're acknowledging that that came up during the survey process. We received some feedback that, there's been talk of the outdoor pool and that we didn't recognize that in the open space plan. And so while we don't have action items specifically around that, we did want to note that that's in there, and also that we specifically mentioned that, needs like that are registered and addressed in the Park and Recreation Strategic Master Plan update. Even if it's not here,
Okay.
that information is sort of recognized. It's in a different plan.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm done.
Lisa,
So I have a very quick question, which is, what is the date of the select board meeting that you are trying to hit to present this?
So we don't have a prospective meeting yet. We were, again, depending on timeline, we were looking to have it be in September, ideally. But again, that timeline is affected by how this process goes, and then putting together the final draft before presenting it to select board. So in a perfect, not necessarily a perfect world, but looking to get this done in September so that we can start we can present to select board and then start planning the whole process. Because really, we want to make sure we have an approved plan before we start getting our team together to start executing the action plan.
So
You'll let us know the date of the select board meeting where it will be presented?
Yeah, we can absolutely let the committee know. It'll, I think we were planning on either the 9th or the 16th, depending on the board's agenda.
So can I ask that it be the 16th? And the reason that I'm asking is Mothers Out Front would like to submit a letter with a comment on the plan related to artificial turf, which is mentioned in this plan. So and that needs to go through its own approval process.
Sure. Yeah, we can, again, as long as that works for the select board schedule, yes, happy to request the 16th.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Alan,
Hi, this is Alan Christ. This was sort of touched on a moment ago, but given that the timeline for the plan has been stretched to from 7 to 10 years, I was wondering if there was some consideration of adding action items where there's been a lot of public support, such as for the outdoor pool. There's been a large, petition drive in town, and it seems a shame to not include that as an action item in this plan over 10 years. But I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Yeah. So as mentioned, we're, specifically with outdoor pool, we're sort of pointing people in the direction of the strategic master plan update, Alan. And also in terms of adding other action items, our action item list is very much based on the discussions we had as a full committee and subcommittee over the fall and winter. So we're not looking to adjust the actual items at this point, because it would involve kind of a full committee rehash and not going back to square one, but really kind of not really introducing a lot more process at a staff level, and you know, we were pretty happy with where the action plan was at, and in terms of sort of the vote of support from the committee there. You know, that action plan in terms of items was pretty locked on our end, so looking to just kind of extend the timelines there rather than adjust. And that's not to say that we can't support other actions just as a municipality moving on, but in terms of the sort of published action items, I think we'd be looking at what we have in the draft right now.
As far as, so I don't see any other hands up. That's helpful. I think we would like to see oh, actually, let's go back to Michael. He's got his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be, I'm trying to picture myself before the advisory committee that I represent and giving an update. And I'd like to be able to give them not an detail description of the particular action items, but something that's more descriptive of what's changed and what made it go from conditional to, you know, why you voted for it. So I'd like to look for a reason that I can give to the advisory committee, again, around financial issues that was changed to make it from going from conditional to approval. I don't have that. I have some things you flashed up. I could say, well, things are stretched out, but you know, that shame on me. I can't say that in good faith. Not having looked at it.
Yeah, I hear your point, Michael. Alex, do we know, you're saying there's not any new items.
No,
Is there any way to assess that there's any apparent financial impact out of what's being changed on the timeline?
I can bring up the marked draft of it right now. I shared it for a second there.
Yeah, let's look at it instead of talking about like what it might or might not be. So
note that this is a little bit rough because this is the draft that we worked off of with the designer in terms of incorporating this. But if you see, like, these are the kind of changes we're talking about in this plan. Moving
Alex,
some of these.
Sorry, before you go through all of the changes, I just heard Michael say conditional. And so I just want to be clear, Michael, the conditional word was being used based off of the review of the boards and committees that we went to after we left this committee, and also the review by the state. So the vote that you took in May on this plan is the same vote you're taking this evening. It hasn't shifted in terms of conditionality or finality of it. The last vote you took was intended to be the last vote. So there is no change in the scope of that vote. It's just that we've returned due to the change in the timeline of the project. So, or excuse me, the timeline of the action plan. So I just heard the word conditionality and just wanted to offer a little clarity because your vote in May was the same scope of a vote that you're taking or being asked about this evening. Thanks, Alex.
I appreciate that, but what's again, I'm feeling, I'm sorry, I feel a little bit out of the link. You've done so much work on it, and I'm being plopped right in here and in the middle of August to try to catch up. I know we voted on the plan, and we did that. When was that? That was
end of May, I believe.
May, yeah. And so, you know, if I were giving a report to someone, they said, "How did you vote?" And I said, you know, I'd like to give a reason why, and I'd like to give an update, like the conditional approvals were given for a number of reasons that Alex went over, and that's good, so I can speak to that. But in terms of the specific changes, I guess I could say, gee, the timeline's just been extended from 7 to 10 years on some issues, but that's kind of lame. I feel that I haven't been doing my due diligence by just saying that. I mean, I could, and I know you've all done good work. We've all worked hard on this, but I'm feeling a little kind of at left field about this.
Alex, as far as process, so I just throw this out there just for the committee to consider. It sounds like we said, this is a draft. There will be some additional modifications. I mean, we could vote to like proceed with the draft? And is there a process by which, if there are any minor comments or review comments back from the committee, that we could vote to have the chair like approve those with those modifications, just for, process wise? Or what are your thoughts? Or, I mean, the other option is give more time and have another meeting like this one, so.
Sure. So the core votes we took as a committee initially were, one was to approve the action plan. And then we had a subsequent follow-up meeting. The last meeting we had was to approve the open space and recreation plan as a whole. So looking at with the, I believe we had a bit of discussion that there was going to be likely some feedback from the state and from boards and commissions that staff could incorporate, as long as it doesn't change the, meaning and or intent or anything, or is not incredibly substantive and things like that. And so I think we could say tonight, for a meeting for a revised action plan. And Michael, I'm happy to make a presentation to advisory, and I can put together a memo that details all the specific changes we went through. I'm happy to provide whatever transparency we can. The last thing we want to do is we don't want to give the illusion that we're sneaking stuff in. A lot of these changes were really clerical changes to make sure that the state requirements were made. But I'm happy to provide whatever insight and clarity I can to whatever board or commission is looking for information on this. So I don't know, Alexandra, I'm curious your thoughts there. Do you think it'd be most appropriate to sort of approve this draft with the potential for additional slight tweaks at a staff level, or what do you think we'd be looking for?
I mean, I think at this point, what we really need is a vote of approval on the action plan. So that vote was taken previously, and now that content change is the years of the outcome of the action plan. So if we can look through those changes that Alex is scrolling through right here, just so folks can see the exact action items and the exact year changes. And then if folks would like to take a vote this evening on the action plan, we can. I think the other option is.
Could we? Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, so it sounds like we could vote on the action plan, and then we could specifically have a motion that might talk about the changes in the way that we understand them, which is, as what I heard, specifically to extend certain items identified by staff from a 7-year period to a 10-year period. So just very narrow, so that you can go back and say, this is the specific thing we voted on this evening, and the rest of the plan has already been voted on, and in the way that we did previously, as Alexander described. Just your thoughts on that, Michael, and then we'll go to Antonia.
Let me hear some other comments, please.
All right, Antonia.
I was just going to reinforce, I mean, if the action plan has already been voted on and not much of that has changed other than the dates, why don't we just go through why you chose those items to update them? What you saw in those updates. I would go through.
Yeah, that sounds great, Antonia.
Sorry?
I'm with you. Yeah.
If you want the vote tonight, I mean, I think for all of us, it's just explain why you've updated those items in the action plan. I mean, everybody's agreed with the action plan per se, so the changes just need to be clarified. Let's do it tonight. Get the vote.
Great. Will?
I was just gonna echo what John said, that the date, what's important are the action items. The dates were when it was a 7-year plan, were our own decision about how long or when we would take these up, or how long they would take. And just because the timeline shifted from 7 to 10, we just adjusted our own perception of how long these projects would take or when they would take place. doesn't change the nature of them or how much they might cost. They would cost the same in 7 years or 10 years. It's just the state came back and said, actually, we've decided that we'd like these plans to be every 10 years instead of every 7. So can you adjust your action plans based on our new guidelines? It's nothing sort of content-wise has changed. So I mean, I'm happy to go through each item and why you change it from 2027 to 2028. But ultimately, if we don't even finish the one from 2028, like John said, there's no penalty for that. It's just our own estimate about when this might be based on how much it might cost, what level of priority we decided it would be, and how much staff might be involved, and if it meets whatever specific action in a rubric that we already created and we already voted on. So I don't like, part of this seems, I get your sense, Michael, that you don't have enough information, or you don't feel like you have enough information, but it's all like the information hasn't really changed. The timing of how we implement this has changed, and wasn't our choice. And it wasn't, we're just re-voting on something we already voted on.
Let's go through it and see if we can get comfortable and see where the committee is.
Great. I will say, I'll share this right now. I will say, as mentioned before, I took kind of a blanket approach here in terms of, for the most part, if something was, unless I had a very specific idea of a timeline in front of me, I sort of added a year if it was in the first half of the timeline and a couple of years if it was in the back half. So looking at, a management plan for all the sanctuaries and conservation areas, that's something that would be coming up in a couple of years. I added a year just as sort of a buffer there. Looking at developing a new system, we're not, don't know how long that can take in terms of tracking open space. So we added a couple of years to that as well. Going through here, these are just, again, tweaks to from 2028 to 2029 and from 2028 to 2030. Basically, when we're looking at these sort of bigger macro level projects that are going to take time. So expanding it out to a 10-year timeline is adding a year or two to those. The ongoing ones, again, we didn't change because that's going to be something that's happening for 10 to 20 to potentially even 30 years, moving out. They're really big sort of not only philosophical, but operational shifts here. Looking out toward, big items that were already set at 2030, moving them up to 2033 or 2034, like adding in these bicycle friendly routes. Again, it's not to say it can't happen in 2029, but as we're looking at
Alex, are those dates, those are deadlines, or they're just kind of like end dates?
They're proposed completion dates. So this is just
Completion
something
dates.
the
Yeah, so it doesn't really speak to implementation or
Right.
aggressiveness. Or you can complete a 2030 item in 2026 if you wanted to.
Absolutely. And so
Yeah,
what we're
okay.
going to do as our reporting is this will be used as a jumping off point for a reporting metric where we'll look at, my first step once this gets voted is building together. When we say something's proposed in 2034, when do we actually start doing it? We're going to figure that out at a staff level. But some of these things we won't start for a few years, and some of them will start in October. And so in terms of proposed completion, ultimately what the state's looking for is they're looking that you're being mindful of this, that you're not just throwing things out and saying, yeah, we'll build 50 new parks and we'll connect them all through, interconnected greenways. They want to make sure that you have a rough idea of what this is at. And for us, it was sort of, can we do this next year, or will it take a few years, or is this a 10-year plan, or is this the 30-year shift, So again, I'm happy to keep going through sort of specific changes, but
Alex, let me ask something also. It would seem to me that so you didn't shorten any deadlines or any completion dates, right? From a fiscal perspective, this actually gives you more fiscal flexibility.
Sure.
On implementation. If there's any impact, it's probably that you don't have to spend money as quickly in some cases, if you so chose, on the implementation strategy. Now, I could see some folks saying, like, I actually would love those things to be completed earlier than 10 years as well, but that's not precluded from the implementation strategy.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying, as a general principle, the extension of the deadline gives more fiscal flexibility. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, Marcus, I think that's a good point, and I'll say that as well. Because the timeline is meant to be a proposed completion by date, the idea is that if grant resources or, new opportunities came available to allow us to fund something that wasn't, proposed to be completed till 2030, but we had, a grant application that came live and aligned with that in 2026, well, we would jump on that. The completion date is not meant to hinder us identifying and securing those available resources.
This all seems super helpful to me. I know you can go through all the individual items, and I don't want to keep you from doing that, but this general approach seems appropriate and adds additional flexibility to the town, if anything.
So I just have one question. I see this, what you've done, Alex, but was this done uniformly across all of the different actions, or could anybody say, gee, these actions were extended to a very long time because they were less desirable or more controversial, like the pool or something like that?
I think, again, without just looking at it here, my philosophy with this was, if it was something in sort of 2026 or 27 that we were likely to have the ability to get kicked off right away, generally stayed away from it, unless it was, again, when we put some of these dates together, it was this might be a 27, might be a 28, but I went through every one of these items, and generally if it was something coming up around the corner, we kept it as it is, and if it were 2 or 3 years out, we just kind of, again, tweaked it a year. And if it was 5 or 6 years out, we tweaked it 2 years. Just as kind of a, it wasn't exactly a mathematical algorithm, but it was pretty close to that. I'd be happy to respond to a specific if someone had it. But again, if you see here, just as we go through, most of the 2026 and 27 stuff stayed at 26, 27. Some of my, some stuff that had a more minor impact or something like that may have been boosted out a little bit, but for the most part across the board, that was the system we used.
Thank you.
Is there a description, Alex, in the document about what the completion date means? I mean, maybe just that clarification and just saying, this gives some flexibility in the implementation. This certainly says we're not waiting to the last minute, right? I mean, or something that just clarified like what that is, so that everybody doesn't over-index on it. I think you're 7 years out, and somebody says, "Oh, the pool hasn't been built. Why not?" And it's like, okay, you're misinterpreting what a completion date is.
Yeah,
we
could add something like that right in this. I mean, we have literally a section here that identifies what these different categories mean in terms of clarity. So we could certainly add a few lines on when we say proposed completion, what that means.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want people over-indexing, like on what this number means. We're turning it into a 10-year plan. It gives more flexibility. The history of this whole thing is we don't get the stuff done. I mean, the last few open space plans we actually fall, especially the last one because of COVID. But our history is we are way more ambitious than we are capable of achieving. And so an extended timeline probably is a reasonable thing, but I also wouldn't want that to make us move slowly. So, you don't want people saying, hey, we should drag our feet so we don't spend money also. Another side to that. So some clarification would be good. Elisa.
Yeah, so I guess I have some concerns. So I understand that there's nothing that would prevent us from completing something earlier than the date in this plan. But I guess what I am concerned about is some of the things that were moved out are climate resiliency items. And so I guess what I'd like to understand is more how this is going to dovetail with the climate action resiliency plan, because pushing out I don't know that we can afford to push out climate resiliency items, especially in light of what's happening at the federal level. And so since I'm here to represent climate, I just think it sends a bad message to like kick the can down the road, especially with, where Brookline as a whole has sort of done the opposite by accelerating our net zero, our timeframe for net zero Obviously, this is not directly related to net zero, but it speaks to, you know, how prepared are we going to be to weather the pending impacts of climate change? So things like, you know, changing over to permeable surfaces. I mean, that impacts a lot of things that are important. So can you help me get comfortable with this?
Do you want me
Yeah,
to speak to that, Alex? Sure, yeah. So I would say that the climate resiliency goals, because of the nature of what they are really cross-cutting into a lot of our planning documents. So right now we're working on the Climate Action Resiliency Plan, and we're pulling content from the Open Space and Recreation Plan to align certainly the verbiage of what the goal and strategy and actions are. But we're also pulling content from the Urban Forest Climate Resiliency Master Plan, from our stormwater model, you know, from our hazard mitigation plan as well. So there are several other planning documents that I would say that speak to the climate resiliency. The climate resiliency goals for the town. And so I actually would say that by having them in here, it just further enumerates that those are priorities. It allows BPA applications, you know, have to address goals in our open space plan. You know, so I think the real point that I would say is important here is that they are in this plan as well as so many other plans, and we're trying to align all of those documents to ensure that when it is time for us to invest in those, we can point and say, look, we've identified this in 6 different planning documents that have been reviewed and approved by 25 different boards and commissions in Brookline. So the support in community interest is here, and we're looking to take advantage of the funding opportunity or the project that allows us to integrate that. So I don't want to say that the completion dates don't matter, but I do think that what a lot of I'm hearing around the timeline is really something that's to be addressed at the implementation level, and certainly something that's to be addressed at the implementation level across multiple plans and departments as well. So
So I guess my, you know, sort of I hear you on everything that you're saying, but at the same time, I also heard, you know, both Michael and John talk about budgeting issues. And so I guess my concern is, given that there is intense competition for funding within the town for different priorities, that pushing something out like, you know, improving wildlife corridors, someone's going to point to the plan to say, well, you know, this isn't an immediate priority, you know, and then, you know, once so that the plan will be used to sort of justify not addressing the issue.
Sure. I think the thing is, though, that the action plan previously was 7 years, and we kind of had things in buckets of short term, medium term, long term. And so the buckets are still the same. It's just the time frame has moved from 7 to 10 years. So look, if Alex is going to hate me, but if the committee doesn't want to adopt a 10-year plan, it can be a 7-year plan, and it can be exactly the same time frame as it was previously, and we can all walk away, and then we don't need a vote. So we can go about it that way as well, and it could be a 7-year plan, and then timelines don't change. But if we're looking to work within a 10-year framework as advised by the state, as allowing us to align with the climate action plan, then we need to have short, medium, and long term. And so the changes that were made reflect what this committee already decided as the time frame as short, medium, and long term. So while I understand the years have changed, I guess that that bucketing of the time frames have not.
I think an important clarification too is that, you know, and we can certainly address this as the chairman mentioned in the narrative here, is that there's nothing to say we can't start working on it on Halloween this year. You know what I mean? Once the plan gets adopted. So a completion date, you know, doesn't mean we start in 6 years. It just means that those, you know, timelines get stretched.
I'd say furthermore on that, like we can say something like, on many of these items, time is of the essence, or something like that. I mean, if there is urgency on some of these things, even when we did kind of like, you know, short, medium, long, I mean, a lot of that stuff was implied and ended up in the spreadsheets on implementation. But I just throw that out there for the committee's consideration. I'll go to Antonia because she's had her hand up for a bit here.
Yeah, I think Alyssa's concerns raised the question. When you read the action plan with the dates that jump from one thing to another, I'm wondering if there is a quick way, Alex, of doing a spreadsheet that actually shows what the ongoing and priorities are. I know that the deadlines don't necessarily mean that the action plan will be done at that point. It could be finished earlier. But I do think that this document is taken by other departments. I mean, I used to read this document and go, oh, well, this isn't going to get done until, 2027. So they're not even looking at it. But what are our priorities? And somehow highlighting that, not just for the departments, but for other people who might be reading them and seeing that actually that there's a push, and a need for climate action and sustainability issues. And what are those? It's not clear in the way that the spreadsheet is done now, what the town is really, the priorities are, what they're working on. I would love to see.
So we do have a priority categorization in the action plan, specifically that mentions whether it's sort of a 1, 2, or 3, and that hits, how many of the different, subcommittees touched on this, how many things, and we can't really organize that by priority without really throwing a volcano into the formatting and how that cascades. So,
but I think
that was there, but yeah.
I think the narrative piece that you're looking for, Antonia, is captured in the draft plan, because we did speak to, these are the committees, how we formed them, and climate change was a cross-cutting theme across all of them, because we felt it was such a high priority. So I do think that the narrative component of that is there. And then, as Alex said, the numerical, quantitative component is in the action plan. And then again, I think the action plan is not the implementation plan. So I do just want to remind especially folks on the Conservation Commission, that the implementation plan is what comes next and is what those 6-month check-ins focus on in particular as well.
So if we see here, this in terms of priority, we've defined also what that priority 1, 2, and 3 means in terms of how it lines up with the community vision here. And you see that on the far right.
And that's
Yeah,
right.
and I think, I mean, from a Conservation Commission perspective, because we're going to have these meetings every 6 months, and this has happened in the past as well. Those are opportunities for anyone in the town or any commissions to participate in the process. And I would strongly encourage folks that are very interested in the timelines, that is the most effective way to influence what gets done when. And the departments look at that stuff. I mean, the whole intent is that these that the actual deadlines and strategy are, checked in on, updated, and established in that format. I worry the only kind of situation I think where these dates might be interpreted as being meaningful for the implementation is if they were like overly restrictive on what that strategy might be. But there's a lot of opportunity, I'm saying, on the actual implementation side that probably doesn't turn to this document for like driving the process. I think Will has his hand up, and John after that.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think in terms of Elisa's question, if an issue that sort of comes up in the climate resiliency plan and becomes a priority, and maybe it's, farther out in this open space plan, well, because they're both mentioned, and then it's a priority in the climate resiliency plan, it can actually, like the priority of that one could supersede the 2030 need of the item on this plan and move it up. Like again, the dates aren't as set as they need to be, and if one becomes more important, it doesn't have to wait till 2030. You can point to it's in this plan and it's in this plan and it's in that plan, And because of that, we need to do it now, right? And like, I don't think that I think they complement each other. And again, as we were talking about implementation, that's where staff are going to sit and say, this keeps coming up. So maybe we should start it, like Alex said, on October 30th and, start to get the wheels in motion, because we're going to be hearing about whatever the issue is from open space, from climate, from DPW. Like, it's time to sort of move this forward.
John Van Soyak.
Yep, thanks. I'm sorry. Thanks very much. I keep going on and off camera here. There we go. I use this term advisedly, but I'm a little worried that we're overthinking this. By that, I simply mean if we were to take what is in the 7-year plan and treat it as kind of a forecast of what we will consider to be priorities in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And often it means the priority that we had in year 1, if we didn't meet every marker of what we were trying to achieve, it's still a priority. And so we're going to try to achieve it in year 2, and the same for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now that, the state has said, let's make these 10-year plans, not 7-year plans. We simply say, we're comfortable with the priorities that we laid out for the next 7 years. We are going to be pretty comfortable in year 8 that those priorities are still our priorities, and same for 9 and same for 10. And at the end of the day, all this means is, as Alexandra said, if we see an opportunity, we'll take it, because it's in our plan. We thought through what we were going to hope to achieve over 7 years, now 10, and opportunity came up to do, item 6 in year 4. And so we're going to take it. To me, that's all this means.
And I'll say from the Conservation Commission perspective, I think that's right, John. Like, when we go through the implementation and look at the dates and check in on those things, the way you just described it is very consistent. And there will be things that are prioritized earlier than their completion date, for sure. Particularly things like climate change, which are brought up, because time is of the essence. Yeah.
Question, can we pursue projects that are not in this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. This is so Anita,
It's not exclusive.
This is our roadmap, and sort of
Right.
certainly
Yeah.
can be a jumping
I know
off
it's a
point
general
for-
plan, but
for-
suppose we had.
Yeah, absolutely.
proposals
And a
out
lot's going
of
to
the
change in 10
generalities.
years. And this is our, vision for meeting that community vision 10, 20, 30 years from now. And certainly countless things will come up that our division will work on, and we'll coordinate with Public Works and other departments on.
And it doesn't affect our ability to get state funding if it's not in this document.
Well, I would say it's a stronger application if it's reflected in this plan for us to apply for a grant, especially a grant that is tied to you having an open space plan. They're going to say
Okay.
site.
How come
cite
it
where
wasn't in
your
the place plan? Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that not every grant is stemming from, that same department and looking for that same prerequisite. But for grants that come from DCR specifically, you have an open space plan, therefore you're eligible for this. Yes, it's a stronger application if we can cite where it is reflected in our plan. Luckily, we have a lot reflected in this plan, so I'm not too worried about us trying to apply for something and not having it reflected in here. It's a very
Because-
robust active plan.
Because of the generalities in the plan you're referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if there were specific, I think if there were specific things that aren't exactly mentioned specifically, they certainly fall within the broader purview of the overall plan and its objectives. I still think you can make a pretty strong case that this plan supports anything I can imagine that would be reasonable.
Yeah.
Just to say that. Elisa?
So So, not to, so I guess a couple things. I would feel more comfortable if we could add language, that like Marcus suggested about, time being of the essence. And that, something, wherever possible, the town will seek to, act on these expeditiously or, and something. And I guess, I hear what everyone's saying, but I guess my concern about and I'm gonna drop it, but I just feel like I need to go on the record as just expressing my concern about this is I do think that there's a lot of weight in an official town document. And so when you get to those discussions where you're competing for budget, to be able to point to an official document that says, we said we would get this done by this point, carries a lot of weight. And so to the extent that things are getting pushed out, we basically took 7 years worth of activities and now we're stretching them out over 10. And that's not to preclude, things from being added in and everything else, but that just kind of feels like, so I guess my just reaction is we sort of, we slackened at a moment when I think we need to be accelerating. And that's it.
As Alex pointed out, there are plenty of things that we didn't even put a date on. So, because they're so challenging, and I'm not maybe as concerned that we are going to get done with everything and not have, plenty in the hopper.
Yeah, no, it's not a question of being concerned that we're gonna run out of things to do, but rather that, while we set out this, ambitious 7-year program, we've now extended it to 10. So what I'm worried about is we're taking our foot off the gas at a time when, especially from a climate perspective, we need to be like pedal to the metal.
Yeah,
So-
I totally understand that. I think probably everybody agrees with that. That makes total sense. Alex and Alexandra, from a process perspective, adding a definition of what this is and why it's important, that doesn't seem to be much more than a clarification. Is that your perspective?
So in terms of, we're talking about the defining proposed
like what
completion
is
date, and that doesn't
Yeah.
preclude start date, and it's just a sort of a rough metric of our idea of when this could hypothetically be completed by.
And I think commenting that many of these items require early action,
Sure.
and maybe even that phrase, time is of the essence.
Yeah, I'm happy to put together that.
Yes, we can absolutely add that language in, Marcus.
Because if someone like, I think Alyssa's right, which is, you can imagine standing up in a public meeting or in a budget debate and someone saying, this wasn't going to get done till 2030. Why are we trying to do it now? I would go to the definition and say those completion dates do not speak to whether or not this is urgent or not. The definition of completion date says time is of the essence.
Yes, yeah, and I would point to the many other planning documents where it's included
That's right.
often that don't have the same requirements for what is included in the action plan. For example, the climate action plan doesn't have a complete by date that's going to be in it, and doesn't have to follow the same standards as a mandated state plan does. So there's a little bit more flexibility in some of those other planning documents, like urban forestry, like hazard mitigation, like climate action plan, that I think would allow some greater, if time is the emphasis we want to make, some greater flexibility in the ability to do that.
I'm starting to feel like we had the same problem with a 7-year plan, but we just didn't have this detailed discussion. Like, I think this has been incredibly helpful and probably will result in more collective action as a result. But I think this input's fantastic. Other comments from the committee?
Michael has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, great. Michael.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for this discussion. I'm very much better clarity on what we have before us, and I'm going to support it wholeheartedly. And I appreciate the work that Alex and his team have done in preparing this. So, thank you for that. I just wanted to address a question that has kind of come up peripherally. And the question is, who is this document for? So of course it's for the state because it's a requirement. But as some other people have pointed out, it's for other people. Read it, they get an idea of what's important. And to the extent that it intersects with other plans that are developed, like the comprehensive plan, I think it's really critical, a critical document. And I think the way it's been written allows that kind of intersection on many different plans that we have. So, much thanks for that. So the only thing that I would really request, Alex, is if you could kind of in a narrative, very short narrative, kind of give a status of.
Whoops, sorry, you broke up there.
In other words, you have a slide that do you hear me?
Michael, you got to go back about 30 seconds because you keep cutting out.
Yeah.
Well, those weren't good 30 seconds, so I'll ignore them. But Alex did a great job with your team.
So are you, Michael, are you looking for do you want a memo of a sort of a summary of changes?
Summary of where we are, like there have been approvals and there have been conditional approvals. What does that mean? To people not in the process, they don't.
Oh, we lost you again.
Conditional approval. Oh, I'm really sorry. Let me get rid of the video. Video off. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be great if I think you had a slide to that effect too, that said these are the different committees that have approved it. These are conditional, but for a lot of people not familiar with the process, they don't know what conditional means. So what are you being asked to do? And where are we on that? If that could be a nice kind of coda for the process.
Okay. What do you envision that? Who do you envision that being presented to?
It could be to all the committee members and say,
Okay.
we discussed it, and as I showed in the slides,
Sure.
here we are. This is the status. These are the next steps, and that would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a sort of a more detailed written summary as a follow-up, just so there's no questions as to what those changes were. And if anyone wants to meet sort of one-on-one or call and say, hey, when you mentioned this, I wasn't sure exactly what it meant, like I'm happy to go through and talk about the specifics in terms of changes.
And again, kudos to the staff and to yourself putting together this document. It's really terrific. And for 7 years, now we're to 10 years of having it to look at. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, also for all the substantive input. It's been really helpful. Elisa.
I think she was just
I
clapping.
think she was clapping.
Echoing Michael with
Oh,
the
clapping. Thank you. Yeah, that's excellent. Any other comments or questions from the committee? One from Anita. Yep.
You're going to think this is a stupid question, having sat through this wonderful discussion, but we finalize this plan and everybody approves it. But the town has a great idea about an open space project that for some reason doesn't fit in any of the language of this plan. Can we go ahead with it anyway? I mean, are we restricted to, I understand this plan is very general and most things will fall into it, but suppose some brilliant plan comes up. Can we pursue that even though it's not here? I mean, pursue funding for it.
Yeah. So, as Alexandra mentioned, it helps our application. If it's the more specifically it's mentioned in here, the more it sort of strengthens our application. But I do think that we've covered a pretty wide, depending on what level of specificity you go,
you did.
we cover quite a lot of stuff. And even if somehow that category isn't covered, our Alexandra and my job in conservation and natural resources is to hit those marks. And if there's a big, plan or a vision or a project out there, we're gonna, do whatever we can to support that. And we'll likely be able to find a way for this open space plan to say that it supports it as well.
Yeah, I would think too, that 6-month process, like that would be a place to have that conversation. And so it is built into the implementation strategy that there's flexibility and discussion. And even as you mentioned, Anita, some, opportunity to expand or comment or to think about setting those goals over time. Particularly, I think that's important with this long of a planning timeframe.
Thank you.
So from a process perspective, it sounds like from the discussion that there is an opportunity for someone to make a motion to approve the draft, to move it forward with the recommendations, particularly a definition around the intent of the completion date. Is that what I heard? I mean, I can't make the motion, but is there
Yeah, I think
someone who would like to make that motion?
I think it would be, yeah, a vote to approve this draft of the action plan, with the, conditioned on the inclusion of, further information and clarity related to the proposed completion date in that same in that definitions section in the introduction. That wasn't worded very well, but that's.
Is there such a motion, or someone else want to take a stab at it?
Marcus, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Marcus, you're on a plane. Do you need?
I'm not on a plane. I'm good.
Okay. Okay.
I just can't hit the mute button fast enough. Who made the motion?
Randolph,
Randolph.
seconded by
Randolph.
John Van Scoyac.
John Van Soyak. And we'll do a roll call vote, which I think I can actually do. Michael Berger,
Yes.
Will Corden,
Yes.
Randolph Nickeljohn,
Yes.
Alan Christ,
Yes.
Sean Lynn Jones.
Not a.
Oh, he's not on the
committee member.
committee.
Oh, sorry. Oops.
Yeah.
I'm trying. Let me. Antonia,
Yes,
Anita,
yes.
Alisa.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone?
Did you miss me?
Oh, John Van Soyak,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Is that everyone?
You did it.
I think we got them all.
Great. Wow, this has been a great committee. It just emphasizes all the hard work you put in. Like there are no rubber stamps here. We think everything through. We do it right. Staff has done a fantastic job. Thank you, everyone.
Good leadership too.
Yes, thanks to the chairs here.
Mm.
And then I'm going to, I think if this is okay, Alex, accept a motion to adjourn.
That
So
sounds good.
moved.
I will note,
Oh, okay.
really quick, that just per this discussion, I will send a follow-up email that'll have some more sort of comprehensive info of what we went over here. So in case any of your various, not only you, but if your various boards and commissions and committees that you represent have questions, you can sort of share that summary, or also they can also reach out to me if they have questions.
Do we have to
We
vote?
really appreciate that. It's a
do we
ton
have
of
to
hard
vote to
work.
let Marcus approve the minutes
Oh.
from the site too? Or is
Say that again, Will?
Do we have to vote to let you approve the minutes?
I think as a blanket level, he's been
Okay.
approved to approve minutes, so
Yep.
you're good there.
I'm approved on that.
Then I
All right,
move
is
that
there a
we-
motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going with Randolph. Alan Christ,
Yes.
Will Corden,
Yes.
Randolph,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John Van Soyak.
Yes.
I'm gonna try to get everybody. Antonia,
Yes.
Alisa,
Yes.
Anita,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well.
Thank you everyone so much
Okay.
for your time and all
Thank
of your
you.
help.
Thanks,
Really
everybody.
appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Thanks so much.
Have a
Take
good
care.
night.
Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Take care.
Alexandra.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye-bye.